Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The sky had turned an impenetrable black, a darkness so complete that it seemed to swallow every trace of light. It was as if the sun had never existed, as if day had never dawned on Earth. For weeks now, the planet had been plunged into this unnatural night, a phenomenon that defied all scientific explanation. At first, there had been hope that it was a temporary anomaly, something that could be explained by the usual quirks of space. But as days turned into weeks and the darkness remained unbroken, that hope turned into fear, and then into despair. The global impact was immediate and catastrophic. Crops withered without sunlight, temperatures plummeted, and energy reserves dwindled as people relied on artificial light and heat to survive. The world was in chaos, a planet-wide panic that threatened to undo centuries of progress. But the worst was yet to come. The source of the eternal night was revealed in a broadcast that hijacked every screen, every radio wave, every form of communication known to humanity. A message from a mysterious alien civilization, the Nocturians, who claimed responsibility for the darkness that had gripped Earth. Their motives were clear: to weaken humanity's defenses, to sow fear and chaos, and to demand Earth's unconditional surrender. The message was delivered in a language that was both alien and familiar, as if the words were being translated by something that understood human speech but not human emotion. The Nocturians spoke of their advanced technology, their power to manipulate the very fabric of space, and their disdain for the primitive species that inhabited Earth. They offered a grim ultimatum: surrender, or face annihilation. World leaders scrambled to respond, but the situation was unlike anything they had ever faced. The Nocturians had not only taken away the light, they had also taken away hope. For weeks, the planet's governments were paralyzed, unable to come up with a plan that didn't involve outright surrender. But in the midst of the despair, a coalition of the world's brightest minds, scientists, military leaders, and arcane practitioners, came together. These were the people who had spent their lives pushing the boundaries of what was possible, and they were not ready to give up. In a secret facility deep beneath the surface of the Earth, these experts convened to find a solution. The facility was a relic of the Cold War, repurposed now for a battle that was unlike any other. The walls were lined with screens showing data from every corner of the globe, each one displaying the steady march of darkness across the planet. The atmosphere was tense, a mix of fear and determination. Dr. Eleanor Carter, a leading physicist specializing in energy weapons, was at the center of this effort. She was known for her brilliance, her ability to think outside the box, and her refusal to accept the impossible. Her mind raced as she reviewed the data, looking for a way to pierce the veil of darkness that surrounded the Earth. Beside her stood Aaron Drake, a powerful sorcerer and one of the few remaining practitioners of ancient light magic. He was tall and imposing, with a presence that seemed to command the very air around him. His robes were adorned with runes that glowed faintly, a reminder of the power he wielded. He had been skeptical of this alliance with science, but he knew that desperate times called for desperate measures. "We're missing something," Dr. Carter muttered, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the equations on the screen. "There's got to be a way to break through." "Science alone won't solve this," Aaron replied, his voice a low rumble. "The Nocturians are using a form of dark energy that's beyond your understanding. But combined with magic, there might be a way." Dr. Carter looked up at him, her skepticism clear. She had always viewed magic as little more than superstition, a relic of a bygone era. But as the days of darkness had stretched on, even she had to admit that there were forces at work that science alone couldn't explain. "What do you propose?" she asked, crossing her arms. Aaron stepped closer, his gaze intense. "A weapon that harnesses both the power of science and the ancient light magic." We create a beam of pure energy, something that can tear through the darkness and strike at the heart of the Nocturians' technology. Dr. Carter considered this for a moment, her mind racing through the possibilities. It was a long shot, a gamble with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. But it was also the only plan they had. "All right," she said finally. "Let's do it." The days that followed were a blur of activity as the task force set to work on the Solstice Cannon, a weapon that would combine the best of science and magic. The facility became a hive of activity, with scientists and magicians working side by side, their differences set aside in the face of a common enemy. The Solstice Cannon was a marvel of engineering and arcane power. It was massive, taking up an entire chamber deep within the Earth. The core of the weapon was a fusion reactor that drew power from the Earth's core, channeling it into a beam of pure energy. But that was only half of the equation. The true power of the cannon came from the ancient runes that Aaron and his fellow magicians inscribed into the weapon's framework. These runes, glowing with a light that seemed to come from another world, would focus the energy into a beam capable of cutting through the Nocturians' dark veil. But as with all great innovations, the development of the Solstice Cannon was fraught with challenges. The first test firing was a disaster. The beam, unstable and unfocused, caused massive destruction in the facility, nearly collapsing the entire chamber. The task force was divided, with some arguing that the weapon was too dangerous, that it would do more harm than good. But Dr. Carter and Aaron were resolute. They knew the risks, but they also knew that this was Earth's only chance. "There's no turning back now," Dr. Carter said as she and Aaron stood before the Solstice Cannon, which was being repaired and reinforced after the failed test. "We have to make this work." "We will," Aaron replied, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We have no other choice." As the team worked to stabilize the weapon, the Nocturians grew impatient. Their forces, which had been massing on the edge of the solar system, began to move. The Nocturians had underestimated humanity's resolve, but they were not about to let Earth mount a counteroffensive. They sent a new message, one that was even more ominous than the first. The Nocturian fleet was on its way, and Earth had mere days to prepare. The decision was made to launch the Solstice Cannon before the Nocturian fleet arrived in full force. The plan was risky, but there was no other option. If they could break through the darkness and strike at the Nocturians before they reached Earth, they might have a chance to turn the tide. Earth's military was mobilized, every available fighter jet and warship readied for the coming battle. The skies were filled with the sounds of engines and the hum of energy weapons being primed. Aaron and his fellow magicians prepared powerful wards and barriers to protect the cannon from both physical and mystical attacks. Dr. Carter oversaw the final preparations, ensuring that the weapon's energy core was stable enough for the upcoming battle. As the day of reckoning approached, the tension in the facility was palpable. The Solstice Cannon was charged and ready, but the outcome was far from certain. Dr. Carter and Aaron stood at the command console, their eyes locked on the screens that showed the approach of the Nocturian fleet. "This is it," Dr. Carter said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "We either break through, or we're finished." Aaron nodded, his expression grim. "We will succeed. The light will prevail." The first wave of Nocturian forces arrived in a flash of dark energy, their ships materializing out of the blackness like phantoms. They were sleek, almost organic in design, their hulls pulsing with an eerie, dark light. They launched waves of shadow-like drones, small and fast, designed to swarm and overwhelm their targets. Earth's defenses responded immediately, engaging the enemy with everything they had. The battle that ensued was brutal, a clash of technology and magic against the overwhelming power of the Nocturia and S.in the skies above Earth. Fighter jets streaked through the darkness, their afterburners leaving trails of light as they dodged and weaved through the swarm of enemy drones. Warships, their massive guns blazing, fired volley after volley at the Nocturian warships that loomed above. The Earth's forces fought with unmatched determination, knowing that they were all that stood between humanity and annihilation, but despite their bravery, the Nocturians were relentless. The shadow drones swarmed over the warships, tearing through their hulls with beams of dark energy. Fighters were picked off one by one, their pilots fighting to the last moment before being consumed by the black void. Back at the facility, the Solstice cannon reached full power. The energy core hummed with a deep, resonant tone, the runes etched into its framework glowing with an otherworldly light. Dr. Carter and Aaron stood at the controls, their hands hovering over the activation switches. Now. Dr. Carter shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Aaron chanted an incantation, his voice resonating with the power of the ancient magic. The runes flared to life, and the Solstice cannon unleashed its power. A massive beam of pure light shot out from the cannon, tearing through the darkness that had gripped the planet. It was a beam unlike any other, a fusion of science and magic, focused and powerful. The darkness recoiled as the light cut through it, a path of brightness that seemed to stretch infinitely into space. The beam struck the Nocturian fleet with devastating precision. Warships that had seemed invincible were torn apart, their dark hulls disintegrating in the face of the Solstice cannon's light. The shadow drones, once so fearsome, were vaporized in an instant. The sky, which had been a battleground of darkness and light, was now filled with the brilliant glow of the Solstice cannon. For the first time in weeks, rays of sunlight broke through the dark veil. It was a sight that brought tears to the eyes of every soldier, every civilian who saw it. The sun, which had been hidden for so long, was finally visible again. The sight of the sun gave Earth's forces renewed strength, and they pressed the attack with everything they had. The Nocturians, realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat. Their warships, once so formidable, turned and fled into deep space. The darkness that had gripped Earth began to dissipate, retreating with the Nocturian fleet. The eternal night was over, and the dawn of a new day began to light the sky. As the last of the Nocturian ships disappeared from the radar, a cheer went up from Earth's forces. The battle was won, and the planet was safe, for now. But the victory had come at a high cost. The skies were filled with the wreckage of destroyed ships, both human and Nocturian, and the Earth's surface bore the scars of the battle. In the aftermath, Dr. Carter and Aaron stood together on a hill overlooking the facility. The Solstice cannon, now silent, loomed behind them, a monument to what had been achieved. "We did it," Dr. Carter said, her voice filled with relief and exhaustion. "Yes," Aaron replied, his tone somber. "But the Nocturians will return." This was only the beginning. Dr. Carter nodded, knowing he was right. The victory had been hard won, but the threat of the Nocturians would not simply vanish. They would need to be vigilant, to be prepared for whatever came next. But for now, they could take solace in the fact that they had saved their world from certain destruction. The sun rose higher in the sky, bathing the Earth in golden light. It was a new day, a new beginning. And as the world began to rebuild, the alliance between science and magic was formalized, ensuring that humanity would be prepared for any future threats. The Solstice cannon was just the first step, a symbol of what could be achieved when the best minds came together in a common cause. The story ends with Earth bathed in the light of a new dawn, the darkness defeated, and the promise of a brighter future on the horizon.